Thanks for joining us for this special webinar presentation by Oracle. Here are your hosts, Christy Mansfield and Trevor Philpott.
Hello everybody, and thank you for sparing your time today. We really appreciate you being here. To everyone who's on the east coast of Australia, thank you for giving up your lunchtime, and for those who are in New Zealand, thank you for giving up your afternoon, and we hope it's going to be very informative. We do have people from all over Australia and mostly regional Australia, so really excited about the conversation we're going to have today with you. A shout out to our friends, and we have a number of people from regional Victoria on, from Wyndham, Bendigo, Mildura, Hepburn, Hindmarsh. Welcome everyone, so pleased that you could join us here today. We certainly have people from Queensland. We're really pleased to welcome our friends at Ipswich, and of course the Sunshine Coast as well. For Hobson's Bay, similarly, shout out to our friends in WA in Canning and Kalamunda, and certainly others around New South Wales on the Central Coast and New Zealand. So welcome everyone. My name's Christy Mansfield. I may have worked with some of you already because, of course, we've done lots of work in the past at Oracle with a number of local councils, and similarly, you may know me through my work at Fifth Quadrant, formerly as Managing Director. I'd like to introduce to you my colleague, Trevor Philpott. Trevor's the Director of Field Service and Transformation at Oracle.
Thanks, Christy.
All right, so the agenda here today is that we are going to look at 4 key areas. We're going to recap on customer experience challenges of today's modern council in local government. We're going to talk about citizen experience and what does it look like. We're going to move into digitisation and the move toward transformation around digital in your environments. And then we're going to talk a little bit about prioritising people, process and technology in local government. If there's anything that you'd like to ask us as we go through, as I said, please ask us a question and we'll get going first up on the challenges. So Trevor, I know we've worked quite a bit with a number of local councils, not only in Australia but around the world. And of course one of the main focuses for government and local government is this idea of smart cities. Do you have any specific insights on this in terms of what local councils are facing around the smart cities plans?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's broader based than just a particular plan, but the recurring theme we see globally is that budgets are reducing and citizen expectations are simultaneously increasing. So, and I don't think that that's a big surprise to the folks on the phone, but I think what we want to cover off here today is some deeper examples about that, and hopefully give some insight into how others in the community or the local council community globally have dealt with this. I think the really interesting thing for councils is that it's one of the few sort of sectors that you and I talk to where competition is non-existent. So, you're not actually competing, you're not stealing citizens from each other or anything like that, like commercials or have to deal with. So, it's a great opportunity to knowledge share and learn from those who are experiencing the same challenges.
And it is quite a big challenge when we look at what the Australian government and governments around the world have laid out in terms of a vision for how local council can use technology to harness the value and the power of residents and citizens. When we look at that there, encouraging greater access and use of machine-readable data to help make government more citizen-focused. I mean, that is really, when you think about it operationally and how to make that work, that's a very, very significant paradigm shift where certainly local councils have been, without question, the centrepiece of community and providing access and connection and service delivery for local communities. But when we're talking about reading data and becoming a smart city, that's quite a big jump into the new next phase in terms of digital. And we're going to talk about that evolution and that journey as we go through this conversation today. certainly when we've got lots of regional and rural communities represented here on the webinar today, that really does offer an incredible opportunity when we start thinking about data, access to data, how data can be used to deliver personalised service delivery, engaging citizens in co-creation of delivery on the ground. And what do you think where we're at in terms of the ability to deliver on that vision, and what do you think it's going to take?
Yeah, I think, I think pretty much everything we need to deliver on that vision is available. It's a matter of applying it to what your specific challenges are. And like I say, while we believe that the challenges globally for cities are relatively common, again, you mentioned in Australia in particular, we have cities that are enormous in geographic size, but quite small when it comes to population. So, while the challenges are somewhat common, the way to address them may be a little bit different. And certainly as the ubiquity of connected devices and the Internet of Things starts to become a bigger part of our lives, I think we're going to see, especially the councils that are geographically dispersed, we're going to see them being able to take advantage of that connected device and the Internet of Things to start driving a better experience and start facing and dealing with those cost reductions.
Yeah, very much agree with you on that. We did some research globally on the expectations of citizens and what they want from local government, and it was across 10 countries, and only 1/3 of citizens saying they're satisfied with public services. But I mean, that's certainly across all levels of government, and personalised experiences are very important for people. So I'm just interested in that and the ability for citizens to be able to engage with government to improve service levels, but also to be able to create and engage in the community in a way that's really meaningful. Do you think that we're starting to see any examples of that? I know that there's been quite a lot of work done in different councils around how to involve citizens. There's been, test and try and learns around hackathons and various kind of technology tools. Are we seeing any interesting killer applications come out around the ability for citizens to really be involved in the development of what that future state might look like?
Yeah, I think that really comes down to connected communities and utilizing, the most simple of tools that are out there to understand what people are expecting. But I think, when I look at this slide, and I think what really stands out is that, again, expectations are increasing, and still people are feeling, probably less so than in the past, that they're getting the service they deserve or that they're paying for. Because at the end of the day, most of these people are ratepayers, and they want something for their money. So, and we're seeing that pressure from what they get and how they experience as a customer in the private sector. This is being pushed into public sector, and councils are one of those areas where people really are starting to demand excellence.
Yeah, and I think we certainly see it in many industries in the commercial sector. There's no question that the empowered customer, the empowered human, the digitised human, the always connected individual now is expecting so much more from all providers of services, whether they can be commercial or in the public sector. The challenge, of course, I can see is that, and you mentioned it before, the efficiencies, the drive down to doing things better but at lower costs, and certainly within Australia and many parts around the world, the amalgamation of councils have then added that extra complexity.
Well, and again, we can't do this at the cost of customer service. So the big challenge is really genuinely, with the pressure to do things better, quite often efficiency comes with the cost of the customer experience, and that's where people really have to, or the citizen experience in this case, really have to find a way to strike that delicate balance.
Yeah, And that's a good point. So thanks for your question, Christy. The question is, do we have the details of the survey that are related to Australian councils separate to other countries? Yes, we do. I can publish that and send it around to everybody afterwards, and that'll be the full details of the research that we've done. So no problem, we'll put that together for you. If I just go to the next slide, if we delve into now a little bit more deeply what customers are actually wanting from their council and the sentiment of citizens. What we're seeing is certainly citizens wanting a faster access to services and consistent and accuracy, a clear path to agent, but even we think perhaps, Trevor, and we were speaking about this yesterday, a clear path to agent is actually not always what's required. It's a clear path to resolution.
Correct.
And in many instances, in fact, self-service is the preferred resolution path, or a digital intervention or a digital application. So we can talk about that in a second. Know me, don't make me repeat anything. And we all know that as customers ourselves, how frustrating that is when we're dealing with organisations, public sector or private sector, that we really do now expect that there's knowledge about us and our interactions and transactions with the organisation that we're dealing with. Handling complex requests online now, not just simple tasks, but allow me to do things in a more complex way, and give me access to other people who share my same issues, concerns, and let me work and collaborate in a community. This is particularly important, I think, as local council starts to think about how it's possible to use, as I mentioned earlier, residents and work with residents as an asset in their community, especially when you're starting to think about driving economic development in the community, driving service delivery, enhancing the ability for the community to improve its overall well-being for its citizens. I'm interested in what you think and what you see as some of the most important components of citizen sentiment.
Well, I mean, when we talk about citizen sentiment, I mean, obviously the most important component is that it's good, right? And we want to see it improve. And I think when you talk about using citizens as assets, it's not just the citizen you want to leverage, but you want to leverage what the citizen is using as their life of technology. So we're seeing a lot of councils starting to take advantage of the fact that a greater than 95% of their constituents now have a device that can capture a photo, for example. So when they're logging a case or speaking to someone about something, they're being given the ability to actually share in real time what's happening, either through video chat or through a photograph. That's decreasing resolution time, increasing the participation of the citizen in the constituents at large. So again, not just leveraging the citizen as the asset, but the things that the assets that they have access to.
That's a good point. And certainly, the know me piece, I think, is really important, but a challenging one as local councils have to link up the back office with the front office and all the incredible services that council's providing that traditionally have been done in different components in siloed environments. So that's a very important piece. Okay, so consistent, accurate information. The number one priority. That is actually very, very much aligned to what's going on in the commercial sector as well, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, this is the number one issue that any customer experience professional is dealing with on a daily basis. How do we make sure that not only our internal people have consistent, accurate information for knowledge, but consistent and accurate that's delivered to the customer as well in the channel that they want. The other piece, which is really an interesting one, is handle my complex requests online, aligning to what we know around customers now wanting, really very happy for everything to be self-service, if that's possible, and complexity is increasing more and more. What are your thoughts on some of that too, Trevor?
Yeah, I was actually surprised at how few came up with the clear path to an agent, because that's like, it's like almost the number one thing that we see in, cross industry is, I don't want to be bounced around. I want to go straight to, like you said before, resolution, or at least be fast forwarded to exactly what I want. So I don't want to go to an IVR system and press 1 and then wait for another explanation and press 0 and then get bounced around. No, that's surprising to me. So this is, it's great to have a learning experience, as it were.
Yeah. For everybody on the webinar, as I mentioned, it'd be great to hear if you have any comments or thoughts about that poll as we go through. Consistent and accurate. And also I've had a comment from different people. Peter, results 2 and 5 go hand in hand.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, and that's very true. Yeah. They certainly do. So based on, some of our research, and also based on the challenges of, that we've described, we see that there are a number of, key things that councils need to think about when you're thinking about an end-to-end customer experience strategy that works across the enterprise, that integrates traditional service channels, face-to-face, back office, possibly contact centre in some cases, oftentimes contact centre. And we know that some councils have certainly invested heavily in terrific service level delivery through contact centres, especially, I'm thinking of Hobson's Bay and Suzanne. Hi Suzanne, I know you're online. So I think, some of the challenges of the modern council will be how to connect those experiences across the organisation, particularly through the amalgamation process, and also through the fact that we're working in a siloed environment in many cases. Although having said that, there's quite a lot of transformation that's
Absolutely.
already happened. Yeah. And secondly, high costs of employee empowerment. And I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, Trevor, particularly as you've worked with a lot of councils who are employing, their field staff as well as and empowering them. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's funny that is a real focus, is being able to make better use of the internal assets. And I think the good news is that technology has sort of caught up with the needs of councils around this. So looking at being able so speaking about field service, for example, it's a high cost for most councils. They've got a number of rangers, a number of inspectors, and that sort of thing out there doing work, and keeping them always on and always connected is very, very important when you're talking about delivering this next generation customer or citizen experience. And I think knowing that technology has finally come to the point where it's allowing people to, for example, and not trying to get too weedy here, but use their own devices. So support something like BYOD, which we know, and you do the research on, when people who at work are allowed to use and bring their own device, they tend to connect more with the device, they tend to be more productive. So being able to, for example, enable a field and let them use their own devices is something that has really started to broaden the appeal and ease the transition into sort of that next generation.
So if they were to use their own device, how would that benefit citizens? How does that then enable the field or council staff members, employees, actually deliver a better service?
Well, I mean, the idea is that when you're looking at enabling a field, a field service organisation and making them always on, just as soon as you do that, by the real-time nature of doing that, you can, you're connected to the constituency. So the people who have raised a problem or a case or captured a photograph of something that is of concern, as soon as you create this real-time connectivity, when the person in the field updates that or closes that case out, the automated nature and the connectivity that you've designed into this means that the original person who raised that case or that issue can automatically be notified, can actually get a survey as well. So you can find out what their experience of this experience has been. So, and that's a really valuable feedback loop in councils learning more about what their constituency expects of them.
Absolutely, that is true, and that constant ability to be able to be real time in the information that we have around the delivery of our customer experience is a really key component of being able to measure and improve operationally, but also design for the future.
Correct.
And you're talking about the ability for people who are in the community with devices being able to instantly report back on information and provide services. The other thing, is this challenge of outdated channels and devices within council or within government as well. Do you think BYOD helps to try to overcome that, or are we really talking about the revamp of digital channels entirely?
Yeah, I mean, look, what BYOD does when you think of it in terms of that is it because it allows people to make a choice that suits them, they're more likely to use digital means, right? So they're more comfortable with it because it's what they wanted, and it then encourages through a much more organic way the use of more modern channels, right? So I mean, when you talk about outdated channels, I mean, there's no question we're talking about the old voice call. So it's expensive. It rarely delivers the service level that the citizen expects either.
Yeah.
So.
So we've just had a question, which is a good one. It's around how do you manage the Privacy Act if staff are using their own devices to store data and personal information? And that's from Christy. Thanks, Christy. I'll let Trevor just think on that for a second, because I've got a question that I could answer from Ken. How do we try and deliver a personal experience with our data sitting in disparate systems? This is such an important point, because certainly as I work with our customers, and my role is to work across Asia Pacific. Last week I was in New Zealand talking with Hamilton Council and Auckland City Council. Next week I'll be up on Central Coast talking with the council there. I mean, this is a really important thing, because personalised experiences are required not just in the government sector, but across the entire sector. And the disparate data question is a really difficult one. So I think the way that we try to think about it is to look at, well, how do you deliver services in a personalised fashion through the ability to draw data in and to have that single view of customer. Of course, there's a technology solution for that, but more than that, it's also a people and process solution too. So then how do you actually enable the culture of personalised service delivery, which is really what councils have always done, particularly when you walk into a local council centre and you get quite, typically a personalised experience. What digital can do is enhance that in such a significant way. So it's really through being able to understand how you can harness the assets and the data assets in your own in the council, bring it all together, look at options that would enable that to quickly help improve the personalisation component through technology solutions, but also the process and cultural piece, aligning to then what does that look like in the digital sphere. Did you want to?
Yeah. Look, that's a really good question, and it's one we face, in healthcare, government, public, in all public sectors. So, look. The simplest answer, without again getting too tech, because I'm not a tech guy, so I'll try to save this, is using a device agnostic client. So typically, what we think and what we recommend is something that's HTML5 based, which is what's currently out there. But it's about being able to keep the data actually off of the device and back in a secure data center where it belongs, right?
So you're now talking about the privacy issues. On
Correct,
the
the privacy,
Thank you.
that's
Sorry,
right.
Trevor.
Yep, sorry,
Yep.
yep. So I wanted to address that because it came up. So, I mean, that's the most simplistic way we see to do it, but there are a number of other ways to do it depending on, what your strategy is around that. I mean, some other organizations require a mobility management solution, but again, that starts adding cost of managing devices in the field and that sort of stuff. So it does come down to a cost-benefit analysis.
Yeah. Now, I'm just going to pick up on the final point here, and that is difficult to keep up with the pace. Now, when I was in Singapore last week, we're talking with online retailers who are now saying they're no longer working on a customer experience strategy in a 3-month cycle. They're working on a weekly cycle of fine-tuning and going to market. So I know, granted, that is in an online retail space, a highly competitive space for capturing customers, but if you bring that down into customer expectations and how quickly we're moving, this is a really important point for local councils. And then really being able to plan for the future so that councils can test and learn on new digital applications and innovations is in a way that's cost effective, in a way that harnesses the power of citizens, and also in a way that is building a new set of skills within council that perhaps hasn't been there before. Did you want to mention anything about that, Trevor, at all?
No, I'm actually, sorry if I could, I'm quite keen on this question here about, is it as simple as build and they will come to move from phone to digital? It's interesting. The answer is mostly yes. There are still people who will resist this, and I'm going off what I've been told by talking to your peers. And we all know who those people are, and so we don't need to call them out and what the demographic is. But it is really interesting that I think when you expose these channels and make them available, you'd be surprised at the usage. And I learned a statistic the other day which absolutely floored me. But the highest percentage of tablet usage in an age group is above 60.
Yeah.
Now, at first I thought that's absolutely ridiculous, but then of course it makes sense because tablets are bigger and they're easier to see. Millennials and younger people use their phones. But still, that's telling you that people of that demographic are now connecting themselves and using digital channels and becoming more familiar and more comfortable with them.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Steve. It's great, and I think we're certainly seeing that, if it's easy to use, if it's a great application that solves my problem quickly in the digital, of course, yes, then they will come. I just want to address Suzanne. So lovely to hear from you, Suzanne. Is there any research on BYOD and staff engagement we can recommend? Yes, I've read some from Forrester and Gartner. I'm going to send that around as well in the pack, so we've got notes that we send that around as well. So thanks for all those questions. That's been great. I'm just going to flick quickly to this, Trevor, because we want to get to the next poll as well. We're really in an environment, I suppose, where we're saying, people do expect so much more in terms of the delivery of technology, the rapid pace in which services can now be delivered in. And of course, we are working in a limited resource environment where there's a lot of change. We've talked about the amalgamation. We understand it's a very, very challenging environment, but yet the expectation is high. And then, it's a complex labyrinth. And that's, I think that's a really good way to talk about it. How do you break that down and make it really simple for customers to engage through the labyrinth in a way that is easy, is cost effective, is efficient, and that's going to drive value for the whole community. And that's the crux, I think, of what we're looking at solving with councils around Australia and around the world.
Yep, agreed.
Let's get to this next piece. So if we look at what we've really been talking about, it kind of summarises it. So the challenges are disconnected experiences, outdated channels and devices, and moving into a paradigm where we want to engage customers, making it easy for citizens to engage with their local council. On the other side, the high cost of employee empowerment and difficult to change and keep pace. So once again, the ability to adapt quickly, empower employees, have knowledge available, etc. And you know, certainly we've been working with a number of councils who are already well and truly down the track and more mature in this area, and we can share a little bit. And some of those folks are online right now. We've just had a good comment from Peter, and that is language is so important in managing interaction expectations. So that is such a good comment. Thanks, Peter. In your experience, Trevor, when you've been working with councils, what are some of the questions or comments that you get around the use of language?
Well, it's interesting. I have to admit, it's one that I haven't come across, but I do absolutely agree. So again, being on this webinar today is turning out to be much more of a learning experience for me than I originally expected. And I mean, when I think about that, and I guess to the question, Peter, is it more? You're saying that when you're talking about pushing people through digital channels and queuing them and asking them interview questions, for example, it is very important, I think, in general, and this is what we see in the commercial space, where the questions don't feel like an interrogation, but more like a conversation. So I would say, in my observation of other businesses, that's what they've used to sort of, I think, the purpose of your question.
Right, okay. And so we're talking about, people seeing councils as their asset, their local community asset. So therefore the importance of the language becomes very key, because making sure that people not only understand, but feel a sense of empowerment.
That they're part of it, not periphery to it, and just that it's not one way.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real, and Steve makes this point just here now, and his point and comment is, isn't the empowerment more a cultural issue than a technology one? And I certainly agree with that 100%. I mean, technology is just an enabler. We know this.
Correct.
It's a fantastic enabler, of course, but certainly the reason we're seeing so much change is because culturally across, and you mentioned it before, it doesn't really matter the generations or the demographics.
Yeah.
We have changed. We're as a species, we are digitally on all the time, and so empowerment is cultural, but not only in our society, but also in our workplaces, in our communities, etc. How do we desire and how do we want to connect with each other? And technology and local council, it's really the key, I think, is being able to have the foresight to see how people want to do that in a way that is enjoyable for them, that provides value for them, that enhances their lives, but at the same time is possible to do in a seamless, easy way from a government perspective. So, thanks for all those comments. That's great. This is a little bit of a busy slide, so I'm not going to go through it in detail. We'll send it around afterwards. But I guess we just wanted to pull out a couple of key points here. And this was some research that we did. Again, if you could increase service levels, reduce costs and ensure compliance while maintaining a complete 360 view of councils and residents and businesses, what would it look like? So this is the ideal future state based on analysts and research, etc. And so there's a lot of components that we've talked about here, but essentially I suppose it's really, if you look at the components, it's really about personalised experiences, right down to even individualised service delivery potentially in the future that is data-led. And we certainly are seeing that that's the concept of smart cities and the use of data through devices and the ability to then provide an individual experience for citizens. The ability to automate and digitise applications and a number of services that we're providing in local communities. The ability to interact with residents across communication channels, so that harnessing of the connectivity and the mobility that we all use and seek, which is a very exciting and potentially, cultural change component in local councils. And certainly we can see that will be very powerful, no doubt, in rural and regional councils around Australia. Is there anything else that you wanted to highlight out of this component? Because they're the ones that really were meaningful for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, obviously being a field service guy at heart, I point to that as probably, it's funny when people interact with their councils and they do so in a manner that isn't actually walking into the council chambers to see someone behind a window or something. The greatest number of interactions I have are with people that are in the field.
Yeah.
So rangers, inspectors, animal control officers, whatever. So it's really important that is done well and done in a manner that, again, is finding ways to drive efficiencies, but absolutely keeping touch with that ever-increasing expectation of a much better citizen experience.
So if I go to the next slide, so how do we really define, or how do we think about a modern resident experience? And again, based on research and work we've done in communities, if your community satisfaction rating was an 85, what would engagement look like? And these are some of the things that people have said and the key priorities. I'd be very keen to see whether or not this aligns with some of the councils who are on the webinar today. And we do have a poll after this, so hopefully we'll get some immediate feedback. But I guess, we're really talking about, in its essence, mobility, as I mentioned, the ability to use the connectivity components that connect community members with councils and services, allowing for fairly straightforward routine transactions like permits or various other payment systems to be able to be done online, but not only on the web but on devices and on a range of through different digital channels. The ability to log service requests using the phone, attaching supporting images. You talked about that earlier in some detail. Being able to have a single view of your own engagement with local council, so a customer portal where you would then be able to see, how you're interacting locally. And of course, we've seen that happen across federal government, and the service delivery at DHS and others. Yeah.
And my service for New South Wales.
Service New South Wales, of course.
I go in now, I can see, that I have a boat and a car and other things like that, and it's sort of all in the same portal, right? It's really handy.
I'm really excited about this sixth one, which is the ability to sell your city and attract more customers to local businesses using modern marketing best practices, social, mobile, big data, analytics and cloud. And I think I had this great conversation in Brisbane recently when I met with the Ipswich folks and a number of other local councils up in Queensland, and we were talking about, how economic development and the future of our communities is not going to necessarily be driven by the traditional methods. In fact, we're going to now, as we talked about, encourage citizens to be the best, champions of local council and local communities. And so I think, that is going to be a very exciting shift. I'd love to hear from anyone on the webinar. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, Peter's comment is, this slide is a great summary of a future efficient council. We think it is too. I think it's a going to be a program and a roadmap for a number of councils to start thinking about what their future state might be. But certainly when we get to that place where residents are your own best champion for attracting investment and development and jobs and service delivery, it's a very exciting moment. Then, it's interesting, right? Because digital transformation and digital applications are very much aligned with service culture, process and technology transformation. So again, that's not a
they're not mutually exclusive at all. They're actually, they belong with each other, don't they?
Council-wide customer experience strategy is key. Look, I mean, in my role as MD Fifth Quadrant, when we worked with customer experience strategies, oftentimes council-wide or enterprise-wide strategy would be a result of process and service and technology transformation. Enterprise-wide strategy comes as a result of improvements in channel, such as digital transformation. So, I would say those that are already underway with service, process, tech transformation and digital transformation would, if they don't already have, would be soon to have a CX-wide strategy. What I am interested in is this Smart Cities initiatives with 18% of people saying that that's important. And so I think that even though it's an emerging space, it's certainly on the agenda, and I'd say fairly soon we're going to see a number of councils develop their future strategies on smart city. So this is a nice comment, a great list to aspire to. Yes, it is a good aspirational list. And I think that it's a stepping out. It's going to depend, it's going to be different for every context and every community. Where those councils who've gone through amalgamation, that component around process improvement and service and technology transformation is going to be the number one priority without question about it. For those that have already done that and they're getting into digital transformation and smart cities, then we're going to see some very exciting leadership in regional Australia around this. A good comment from Steve, thanks Steve, is this chicken and egg, what comes first as a driver of activity? We have this debate quite a lot in our team, and our role at Oracle is to help Oracle transform, as well as to help our customers and the people that we work with around the region to transform as well. So Trevor, what's your view on this? Is it chicken, or what comes first?
Well, the first thing that comes is awareness. Before any resolution is an awareness that you need to improve. And believe it or not, I believe there are still businesses, not just councils, but businesses who are commercially at risk because they haven't made themselves aware of what's happening around them. And then out of awareness comes desire. And the desire, I believe, does fall into the service culture, right? So it really does have to start, from the gut, the want to make this change. Because look, the technology's there, and the technology's been there for a while. So, and the accessibility to it is only improving, and the cost of it is only decreasing. So, it first has to be that desire.
So there's got to be a big drive, but then there's got to be the data that says that expectation from citizens is at a certain point. And in addition to that, if we do transform, or if we do reach that future state, along that journey, there's going to be incremental and, in some cases, significant efficiency enhancements for council. So we're really driving into what we could be in the future, which is exciting. My view is that the driver is going to be customer expectation and customer empowerment. And I think that it's always going to start with that. We've got only 12 minutes left, so we're going to shoot through. So the imperatives, we see it in three key areas: engagement of citizens, adaptation of what the expectation is from internal and external stakeholders, and the ability to empower the staff. We're going to move now into the prioritisation of people, process and technology transformation. It's an interesting thing because when you start thinking about customer journey mapping in councils, particularly some of those customer journeys that perhaps we've done, which are routine type journeys, like fines, parking fines, or it might be property approvals, etc. Some of those journeys are quite complicated, and when those councils that have mapped some of that are then able to improve business processes. So if we look at the results, and we had 85% of people vote again, business process improvements are the areas where a lot of the focus is. That doesn't surprise me, because as you start thinking about how citizens engage and what that journey is, and I know that there are a number of councils who have participated in customer experience journey mapping over the last 18 months. Suzanne, thank you very much. She wants to click all three. They do go hand in hand, don't they? So I think that once you've done the customer journey mapping piece, then there's so many improvements that can be made around business processes, so it doesn't surprise me. And they're the quick, easy wins in many ways. People and culture, of course, then you flow out of that when you start to see, then how can we enhance the citizen experience just through different ways that we engage with citizens in all of those potential touch points, or what we call in this world the moments of truth that we're familiar with. And then of course, then how do we shape the future, and what underlying technology is required, or how do we then harness the assets that we have within our business that might be legacy oriented. How do we harness that for the future? And thinking about how we do that is an awesome thing to do, particularly today where we are operating in the cloud, and it becomes so much easier and faster to be able to drive applications to enable that. We've had a really good comment here, and it's from Peter. Thank you, Peter. Most council staff are also citizens and have a big part to play in how council needs to change and improve. That's such a good point.
Yeah, well, I mean, even if they're not a citizen of that council, they're a citizen of a council, so they are a customer somewhere, right?
They are a customer somewhere.
We've all experienced this, yep.
Yeah. Steve's saying we all have to remember behind every transaction is still a person, not a machine.
Which is exactly why we're having this webinar.
Which is exactly why, yeah. And so we completely agree, because we're excited by the ability for the machines or the technologies to make it easier.
Correct.
And we always say that technology is not about technology; it's about people.
Yeah.
And so this is, and it's only one component around business process improvement, in addition to culture change as well. It's a great comment that we just had from Christy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christy. It's been great to have your contribution today. Thank you. And the comment is, some transactions don't need a person if you get technology correct.
So true, and for many confronting, because the reality of it means that sometimes workforces are rationalized, but I mean, it's not necessarily anyone here who's created this. I mean, when you're forced into budgetary constraints, you have to do what you can, and again, I know that we're repetitive on this, but the expectation is increasing for better service while you're still being forced into ways to cut costs. So you're spot on, Christy.
Thanks, Christy, for that. In the meantime, these are some of the tools that we can provide if you are interested to help sort of think about some of your future state and your maturity. These are free tools that we use with councils and commercial organisations around Australia, around Asia Pacific. So we can help you with a very quick customer experience assessment so that you can see where you're up to in terms of fast benchmarking, and potentially if we can then benchmark you against others, then you'd be able to see perhaps what might make sense in terms of future state, so long as, of course, it aligns with your people and your citizen expectations. Digital transformation roadmap, so we can help you with some of that. Again, that's a maturity assessment in terms of where you're at in digital and what might make sense for you in the future. And then customer experience journey mapping. This is where we actually train you to do journey mapping. It's something that myself or one of our colleagues in our CX strategy team do regularly with our customers. So it's a half-day training on what is customer experience journey mapping, and then the rest of the half is we actually map a journey with you, and then you take that into your organisation so that you can do journey mapping on an ongoing basis. There's a good question. Thanks, Steve. In your experience, is there a local government that is leading the practice in digital transformation?
It's almost unfair to answer that, isn't it?
It's a little unfair.
Yeah.
Look, I think that there are a number of councils who are certainly looking ahead in terms of how they can become digitalised.
Yeah.
And where they start is really going to depend on a different context. And it does depend on how digital ready you might be as an organisation, how mature you are in your customer experience strategy, and organisations that have got a very strong service culture moving to digital, there's not going to be a great step forward because many will see the ability to enhance self-service, will improve the people that are handling more complex requests, etc. We are seeing some councils starting with enabling field service as a way to get some fast traction and ability through digital to drive a better experience, to drive more efficiencies. I think that, of course we see Brisbane City Council is, a leader in customer experience. I think we all would be aware of that. We certainly know that there's a great investment in some of the metropolitan city councils around Australia and Auckland, that great transformation as a consequence of amalgamation of a number of different councils in Auckland as well. And then in regional Australia, I think this is really starting to hit. So we can say, how can we do this in a way that it's fast, efficient, and drives more value? And we're certainly seeing the mobile applications and digital applications, online self-service, as something that a number are thinking about and investing in. But of course, it has to be done in a way that makes sense.